is the Bristol Flyers Podcast.
All right, we're joined by Andreas, Kapoulas and Nick Burns. Thanks a lot for coming on. You guys are the first guests we've had on this podcast.
Very excited to be with you, Joe.
It feels like ages since we've actually spoke in person, face to face. Really, I mean, it's March and so much has happened over the last few months. How have you been sort of coping during this pandemic?
I think like probably, I'm sure Nick will say the same thing, is just trying to make the best out of the situation that we have. A lot of time spent on Zoom calls, for sure. A lot of time gardening, probably in Nick's case, a lot of cooking. I think it's just unprecedented time. So going day by day, having a routine, and just kind of looking ahead. Really, there's a lot of uncertainty, but you can only control what you can control, as they say. So you gotta just kind of get along with the day and just make sure you do what you have to do to stay safe and keep others safe and just look after each other. Really.
Nick, we've had to grab you out of the kitchen. I know you've done a few of the home cooking videos during lockdown. How's your social distancing been going?
Yeah, well, I think the thing about the cooking is I got well stitched up here, because what people don't know is that was like supposed to be a series. Well, I did the first one, and then it was the other coaches. So like we were going to have Andreas doing one, and Christian Hill doing one, and Coach Burns doing one, but they all bottled it, the rest of them. So
he was so good, I didn't want to interrupt. Sorry, he was so good at it, I didn't want to jump in on it. So
that's it. The engagement numbers are massive. That's why you just wanted to keep it going, Nick.
Yeah, I think it is. I got a big family, I think. I don't know. But, it's been funny, hasn't it? I think that the lockdown, I think a lot of people probably, it's been a lockdown of two halves, hasn't it? The first, was it 6 weeks, 8 weeks or so, when it was really quite strict. And I think everybody was the same, weren't they? We think, well, we've got to do it, so we'll manage it. And then the second half's been a little bit of, I think, that I get the feeling there's kind of a mood where a lot of people are just getting more frustrated than anything else. That when things start to get back to normal a bit, when you can shop a little more, get back to work a little more. I've been able to go into work a bit more. You just think, I want it to get back to normal now. And of course, it's still, still in a dangerous phase, isn't it? So it's, in some ways, it's a bit more difficult. I think being a bit more difficult the last few weeks, I found it more difficult than maybe it was at the start. I don't know.
How have you been making the most of your time during lockdown? I mean, I imagine you've probably been watching hours and hours of Synergy and watching games back. And is it a good chance to have that break from basketball, or are you kind of itching to get back into it now?
I think certainly, the way the season finished, we're not able to complete things. So it was a little bit difficult. So the first few weeks, it's what Nick said, is the first few weeks, this was unknown. So you're just trying to get on with things, basically. But as the weeks have gone by, certainly itching to get back. I mean, as you say, a lot of games, reviewing things from this past season, different projects, spending time with players on Zoom calls and talking about skills, watching individual players' video. With Nick, a lot of time spending talking about players and plans for season ahead, reviewing what happened this past year. It's just different in the sense that so much time is spent on the screen. You cannot be on the basketball court. Certainly missing Wise. There's no question about that. And I even had to go. We have an outdoor court here, quite close to us, walking distance. So me and Ursula went and shot some hoops a little bit, and it was quite nice to see. And it's getting to that point now. And as the social distance measures are reducing, I think it would be nice to get going with things. And I would like to do some individual skill stuff, perhaps with players on outdoor courts and getting access to Wise. It's been difficult, but trying to maximize what we're doing in terms of our review and preparation for next season at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, the season, it ended so abruptly back in March. It seems like ages ago now. That the season, almost like a different year as such. But how do you kind of look back on the year as a whole? I know there were a few highlights. Obviously, the Cup Final and beating Leicester for the first time. What did you make of the 1920 season?
Well, as you say, there have been some real highs. Making to the first National Cup Final, I mean, it has been a historic achievement for the club. It's the first National Final in our BBL era, so some history there. Unfortunately, we're not able to come up with our first national title. But certainly now that we've tasted it, we want to be in another one for sure as soon as possible. You mentioned some, we haven't beaten Leicester before, and we were able to do it twice this year. And that was certainly something that, it's another achievement. But I think overall the team, I think we've had a good cup run. And the league as well. We felt we were in 8th place in the league table with a team that had played the fewest games. So we had a lot of games, and we were certainly excited to see how the last couple of months of the season will play out. We will never know that. I think it is what it is. But certainly, I think for us, the 6 years in the BBL, it has been about progressing. And I think we took some very positive steps forward this year. We still have areas to work in our game, our consistency in our game on both ends of the court. And that stuff that we've been talking with Nick and where we want to go. But it's about building, and it's a journey. It's a process. We've always told about that. It's not a quick fix, and it's great to see things moving in the right direction.
Nick, I know you've been with Andreas from the very start, back all the way, back working their way through the NBL divisions and the progression. I mean, this year, obviously, to make that first final, the progression over the years, you can clearly see the direction this club's going in.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the even early on with the cup, because the cup was the league, the round robin basis, wasn't it? I think we played 10 games before we got to the quarters. That is almost a season with it, a season before the season, wasn't it? I think from memory, we lost a couple of games, didn't we? Because I think we had Worcester in there, and we went to Royals, and it was that sort of disappointing start where we felt we had a good squad of players. We felt the squad were, as good as we had probably over the 5 years. But I can remember, we talked about it, and I said to Andreas, what, I think we've got the tough half of the draw here. Worcester are good, Royals at the start of the season are good. I think we're fine. And, sure enough, we managed to, I think we were in the tough half of the draw. And we had to do the difficult thing and go away to win in the quarters, which we did. And, I think getting to the cup final, showed that really. I mean, I think Worcester were, I suppose, if I don't know if that team is still intact. It's a new season, I suppose it's where, isn't it? I think they were an excellent team, fully deserving of the cup win. And Royals when they were playing were stacked full of talent as well, and we did really well, I think, early season to come out of that. And as far as the league went, I mean, we were I think 5-7, wasn't it? We had that terrible first weekend where we lost 2 games. We had Sheffield on the rebound, who were absolutely determined to beat us because we'd beaten them the week before, and then going to Surrey the day after, which is never easy to go. We were suddenly 2 games down. And we've since then in the league, we've gone 5-5. And with all of trophy and cup going on. And it's been very up and down. We've been very good on occasions. And we've had, we had a few games where we felt, we really were below par. But I did feel, I don't know if Andreas will agree with me on this, that we kind of come through that after the cup final. We sat down as a group of players, and I think the players, really were well focused, and we were ready to kick on at that point in the season. And I do think, it's easy to say, but I do think we would have gone on, to get the winning record and get into the playoffs and be a threat in there. But, I mean, we had how many overtime games did we have this year? We had overtime 2. Did we have 2 double overtime games? I lost count. There were so many close ones. It was crazy. So.
Yeah, I think that cup final in particular, I think it was something the fans needed as well, because you get that big day out in Birmingham, you get the travelling support. I mean, you saw them all there in the red t-shirt. It looked fantastic on the day, and for something for the fans. I know we weren't able to go away and take the title in the end, but it's a good sign of things to come, isn't it?
It's definitely, it was great for the club. It is great for the club, and I think for the league as well, because it was 2 teams that you don't usually see in a final, and usually you have your Leicesters, your Newcastles in those type of games, and it was 2 teams that you don't usually see there, and it was one of the most anticipated games, and I think certainly that we played against each other through the start of the season, and the attendance, it was the highest attendance cup game in the BBL history. So and from the fans, I mean, it was a great day out. I think seeing everyone on those red t-shirts and just the support. before the game, during the game, and after the game as well. After the loss, everyone was there. The last 15 years is a journey, coming from the lower divisions now to the top flight of British basketball, being in a cup final. Fans can see the progress. They can see the hard work that goes behind the scenes. And, it's not just about the players, the coaching staff. It's all the other people that make a stick, all our volunteers, everyone that is there on game day. And you can see how much it meant. I'm sure Nick will agree. You can see how much it meant to people being there. We lost the final to a great Worcester side, very tough opponent, and well deserved for them to win the cup. But I certainly believe we're going to be there again in the near future. And I think certainly we're going to have the experience from it, which will really help.
Cup finals are funny. They're difficult games, cup finals, because everything's different about them. You watched a lot of cup finals, trophy finals, BBL in the last few years, and they're very rarely good games. They're very often low-scoring games because players, they don't get their normal warm-up. You don't get your 1 out. You don't get your 20-minute stretching, walking around, and your full 1 hour warm-up, whatever it is. You have to go out and warm up in the dark for 20 minutes because they haven't put the lights on. And then you're playing in an arena where, the backboards are miles away from the end walls. So for the shooters, that sort of depth of field shooting is very, very difficult. And, I don't think how many times we played Worcester this season? I didn't think they had a great game, but they were better than us. And I thought, to be honest, it was a poor game. It was two teams scrapping really hard. You just have to try and find a way to win. I mean, Andreas, you remember when we won our cup final in the EBL? I mean, it was less than, we went to overtime, didn't it? And was it 59 all or something at full time? It's a terrible game, but you just got to find a way to scrap it and win. And Worcester managed to do that. They were better than us on the day. And the thing is, we'll be better next time. When we do it next time, that experience will be, will help us a little bit. But they are, they're difficult games, those. And, that's something, I would take from the day and think that's where we'll be better next time when it happens.
I totally agree with Nick. I think the experience of it and being in that big stage, I think that's something it's very difficult to recreate. And you can talk about it, and you want kind of guys to feel like they're just playing another game. But the reality is not just another game. Everything is different, as Nick says. So I think that experience, it will help us all, players, coaching staff, and we'll be ready for it. It would have been great to win it. But I think I still feel like we don't want to take away from what it was, because it's part of our history. It's great to be there. We want to be there regularly. And I think I agree totally with Nick. We're going to be better for it in the future.
I just want to move on and talk about how the season kind of came to an end. Just if you can cast your mind back to that last week of the season before the league shut down, we were playing Glasgow Rocks. You mentioned it earlier, Andreas, all the other sports had shut down in the country at that point. And leading up to the game, were you kind of expecting that game to take place, or were you kind of anticipating that they would have maybe shut it down as well? Or
that week was a difficult week. A lot of things were going on. I just remember the night before the game, we were back and forth with the league and the other team, and just kind of, myself, Nick, and everyone else involved, we're just kind of looking what's going to happen. It was just a very, very difficult week. And, at the end of the day, we're following government guidelines, and we went ahead with the game. I think just from coaches, players, I think spectators, volunteers, everyone, it must have been so difficult. You were hearing a lot of things in the news, and being in that situation, certainly it had an impact on a number of ways. It was it was something that we had never experienced before, and you certainly didn't think in 2020 you'll be dealing with it. So I think it had a lot of challenges that week, and we made the call to play the game, and really after that, a couple of days after, everything went to shutdown. That was just it was almost strange, because you're playing in a season, and you're thinking, okay, this is it, this is what we're doing this week, we're looking ahead, okay, this is our schedule for the next 3 or 4 weeks, and suddenly something changes basically, and there's no basketball, there's no practices, and you're in this situation. It's just unprecedented, it's just exceptional. You just don't get those type of situations.
I remember the week before the Glasgow game, we had Leicester Riders at home, and we put out a statement saying that the players wouldn't be shaking hands with fans, taking photos after the game. I remember at the time thinking, maybe this is a bit too much. I didn't think how serious it was, and then all of a sudden, bang! A week later, we're looking at the potential of the league getting shut down for the season. I think it's crazy how quickly people understood how severe this virus was.
Yeah, that was the week. I think the Glasgow game. In terms of how I know how I approached the game was, thinking this is going to be the last game of the season. So the result doesn't matter because we're not going to be playing after this. It was obvious looking at what was happening abroad, everything was going to shut down. One of the problems we had in deciding whether to play the game is that nobody would take a decision on it. Government didn't take a decision. Nobody took a decision. It was basically down to us and therefore Glasgow. And Glasgow were already down because they were playing Plymouth the night before. So nobody was going to say you can't play. And in that situation, you play. We're a professional basketball club. If nobody's going to tell us not to, then we're going to play. So there was no decision really. But and that was why it was a really funny atmosphere because everybody knew what was going to happen, but here we were still playing. It was weird. At that point, nobody was being told you cannot play this game, but we all sort of knew what was coming, and that was the odd thing. And nobody was prepared to say this, can't happen until the government, when the government announced it, and then it became easy for everybody. But yeah, it was a funny week, a difficult week.
And I remember the trophy final was the next day, the BBL trophy final, and then the league was officially shut down and there was no basketball. What do you think of that decision to actually end the season and sort of make it almost null and void, really, because no champions being named either?
There's different. Everyone has different views on this thing. At the end of the day, I personally think it was the right decision. I think in terms of the basketball league could not carry on, not having spectators, but also elements in terms of testing, things that the Premiership has put in place to carry on with the season. I think for a number of reasons, clubs and league will not be able to do so. Plus also, I think government support is very important. And there was an approach from the BBL in that regard, and that was not really followed up. So I think it would have been very difficult for all the BBL clubs to carry on with this. So I think it was the right decision. All of us wanted to carry on with the season, but some players had gone home. I think it would just not be a situation that it would be the same. I don't think it would be the same anyway if the league was to restart. So I think it was the right decision. Put an end to it. It was what it was. Having the league could have gone in so many different directions. I know Glasgow were leading this, but Leicester were very close and they still hadn't played a lot of their games. London Lions, I think, had already won the first game against Glasgow, so that head-to-head potentially could have gone their way. I think it was the right decision to proceed like this, and no one wanted to finish like that. I think we said with Nick, COVID won this. Unfortunately, no one won the league. COVID won it, and I think in the scheme of things, I think the league acted the right way. They kept the league suspended to see what the situation is, see if there was a possibility to restart with things. But as time was going on, it was not. It was clearly that it wasn't feasible. So decided to call it quits, and all the clubs can now look forward to what's to come.
Yeah, I agree. I think the league, and we were saying this at the time, this isn't with hindsight, I think the league got it right. I think from my point of view, maybe they could have done it a bit earlier, but there were good reasons why they didn't, because some of the clubs did want to sort of give it a bit of a chance just to see what happened, which is fine. And I think the league did the right thing. And I think playing the trophy final, bear in mind again that there'd been no directive that had come. There was nothing wrong with doing that. To have that competition gone so far, and one game after you'd had a round of games the previous day and the previous Friday, I thought it was okay. I didn't think that was particularly controversial under the circumstances. I think it was the right thing to do. So I think the BBL took the right decisions on that.
Yeah, I think to restart the season, and there's been different models like Champions League. They're looking to play the last 8 competition in September, perhaps. I think the reality is if we could not carry on this season, I think it would be almost pointless having a completely different set of team playing the remaining of this season in September, for example. I think it was the right decision to look if it was possible to carry on, and as it wasn't, then the decision was made to cancel the season, really. And now I think everyone is looking forward ahead, and hopefully, we can get things going as planned, as the league would like to see, and start in where we will start under regular conditions. But I mean, that remains to be seen. That there has to be flexibility, and the league is looking at all different options at the moment. And hopefully, we can start things as in that kind of end of September, start of October type of period. But we just got to see how the next few weeks play out.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would say, just on the Glasgow thing, I mean, it was tough on Glasgow. I mean, I felt Glasgow were the best team we played. And yeah, they were ahead, but that doesn't mean that they should have got the title. The league couldn't give them the title. A lot of things could have gone wrong there. We know how tight this league is anyway. And there was still a lot of basketball to be played. So the league had no option there. But it was tough on Glasgow because I think, I felt they were, we played them a couple of times and I thought they were the best.
They were playing some really good basketball, and I think they were operating very well on the floor. And it's tough, but they still had 5 games left, and 2 of them, if I'm correct, were against Leicester and London Lions, I think. So a lot to play there, and London could make a run, Leicester could make a run. It was open and things, and I think it would have made very exciting playoffs this year. I think the playoff games could have been, and also it was the new format as well that we will have this year, where you don't have the aggregate score and you play best of 3 series. So I think it would have been really exciting, not just the league race but also the playoff race, and see which will be the teams, because it was so. I think every year the league gets more competitive. Nick mentioned it basically, and you saw the rise of Worcester this year, and you saw how good basketball Glasgow were playing, and I think it will have made the last 8, those playoffs games, will have been really exciting games to follow. But it is what it is, and at the end of the day, it was the right decision.
Yeah, at the time of the season got suspended, there were, as you say, around 4 or 5 games left of the regular season. A couple of them were at home, so obviously clubs missing out on that ticket revenue as well. Andreas, you probably know more about this than Nick, because you've been involved with some of the financial discussions at a board level. But what kind of impact has this stoppage had on the Flyers as a business?
Well, I think it's difficult for any business at the moment. The sports industry has been hit in so many different ways, and the uncertainties that it creates as well. Not being able to play those last 3 games, the game day revenue associated, not just ticketing, but secondary spend, everything that goes around it, basically, sponsorship commitments, things that the clubs was not able to fulfill. Not just the Bristol club, I think every club in the BBL. So there is a few things there. I think clubs have been dealing well with it, communicating with supporters, and I think everyone in the wider basketball community has been supportive of it as well. I know, speaking to other clubs, I think spectators and everyone has been supportive of clubs and trying to, and they understand that these are exceptional times. And I think looking ahead to it, it creates, there is uncertainties, in terms of ticketing and commercial side of things. But everyone wants, basketball will restart, basketball will come back. There's no question about that. Hopefully we can avoid a second spike or a second wave. I mean, things that have been put in place from government, like things like furloughing and all those kind of things, have been helpful. But you see now, as things are changing, you see companies, the unemployment levels are increasing. It's not a pleasant situation, and the sports industry have been hit, and not just basketball. I mean, you look at other like football, rugby, all the sports have been hit that way. I think what we need to do is just clubs are taking actions to be in the best place possible for the start of next season. I think we need to focus on that. Basketball will return, normality will return. It might be a different normal, but it will happen, and I think everyone is putting things in place to be able to handle what comes next. There is an uncertainty, which it's very difficult sometimes to forecast and work on budgets and work with your partners in terms of what's coming ahead. Here in Bristol, we're looking ahead. Our commercial team is working really hard. Everyone within Bristol Sport is there to support all clubs. I'm excited for next season, whenever that may start. I think Nick and I have been talking a lot, and I think the wider implications, across the whole of the country, are going to be felt. But I think at the moment we cannot do anything about the past. I think we just got to look ahead and do the best we can, basically, with the resources we have. I think this coming season is going to be a tough one for everyone. But hopefully, if we can go past it and have a basketball season and have some normality, I think that will help for the things to come in the future.
How do you think next season will look? Will there be socially distanced crowds? I know the league has said they want to go out in September, October time to start the cup, because obviously they did the cup group stages first, followed by the league, and they've also said that they want to do more games next season as well, playing each other 3 times with the playoff final in May. How do you both see that season looking, and do you think that we could get fans in place for the start of the season in September, October time?
Obviously there's uncertainties around it, and there's a lot of things, affordability for people. A lot of people have lost a lot of revenue, and will sports get affected by that? Will people want to go and watch sport? I think people will want to go watch sport, and I think in terms of the BBL, the reality is you cannot have games without spectators. We can operate with the reduced capacity perhaps for the short term, but the reality is we will need spectators. And you know what? It's not just the BBL. I've spoken to agents, and I've spoken to clubs in other leagues and stuff. I hear what's happening in Greece, in Spain. I speak to some EuroLeague clubs, and you cannot have games without basketball. You can have it short term. The ACB and in Germany, they played the remaining of the games behind closed doors and had this mini tournament type of format. But the reality is, it doesn't matter if you're a EuroLeague club, if you're a BBL club, whatever you may be, you need spectators. You need people to come and watch your games. It's an essential part of sport. Really, the sports industry cannot operate effectively without spectators. And hopefully, if things keep going in a positive way, you have obviously pubs opening up, social distancing measures reducing. So no one knows what's going to happen around the corner. No one knows what's going to happen in 2 weeks, in 4 weeks. But we've got to be positive, and we've got to be preparing for that. And hopefully we can return at the end of September, start of October, wherever that may be. But if not, I think the league remains fluid. I think they're dealing this the right way. All the clubs are in regular communication. But we're going to be back playing when it's safe for our players. It's safe for everyone involved in our sport, staff, volunteers, and when we have everything in place to do so. I don't think we should rush to get back to it. Just to go and play basketball. I think we got to make sure we look after our players. We've got to look after everyone involved in our games, including spectators as well. It has to be a safe environment. At the end of the day, that should always be number one priority in my mind.
Yeah, a couple of observations I'd make. One is we've got to wait and see what football do as much as anything else, because it's going to be safer for spectators outside than inside. So at some point, football grounds will open up, whether it's socially distanced or not. The second thing, though, is we're not going to know until potentially the last minute, because there's no plan. A lot of people know I'm a teacher. I work in education. There is no plan in education. The head teacher of my school watches the news every night to find out what the policy is. These decisions that you hear are not taken consulting the people that it affects. And there is no consistency to it. We are told that schools are going back 100% of kids in school in September. Universities are not going back. Their students are going to be doing everything online next year. There is no logic to that. There is no logic to any of this. We have to expect anything. And we have to be ready for anything. And we have to be ready for the green light. But also, I think where possible, we ought to try and be proactive. If we can get our arenas sorted out where we can, taking into account family groups and maybe have 1 meter social distancing, let's try and do it and try and be proactive and show people we can do it. If we can arrange for games to be played, on YouTube subscription or whatever, let's do it and try and show people. Although I agree with Andreas, and to some extent it defeats the point. What we want more than anything is to get people able to go to a basketball game. I mean, who's winning trophies doesn't matter. It's all about taking the family to the game on a Friday and Saturday and enjoying it and getting back to that kind of normality. Sadly, I think that's a way off yet. We may be able to get the competition going a bit earlier without supporters, but we can't predict. We've just got to be ready for whatever happens, I think. I
think it's tough from a basketball point of view because BBL doesn't have that TV revenue that other sports do. So to even go ahead behind closed doors, it doesn't make financial sense. I mean, you can't. Ticket revenue is a huge part of what Flyers does, and a lot of other sports outside of football as well. It's like you say, it's not just basketball that have been suffering. One of the things that kind of intrigued me a little bit was the format for the new season. Obviously, you have that cup group stage first, which was the first time they did it last year was the first time they did it, and as you say, it was almost like a mini season. But the plans obviously for next season are to play each team 3 times, similar to what was done a few years back. How do you feel about, what are your thoughts on the format change?
I think the cup works very well because you have a period where you can spend with your team working on things, and there is something at the end of it because you can go and win a trophy early in your season. And then you start the league. I think there is different feelings about it. Should we be playing so many games early in the season for a different competition? Certainly, it felt strange playing games this year, going into November for the cup, and then almost, there is all that momentum, all those wins, kind of thing that you build, and then you get to December and it's almost you're back to 0-0 kind of thing. That was a little bit strange, I have to say. But I think the league is increasing the games. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. But say we get to a situation where maybe the cup group stages cannot take place, perhaps. So having more league games will be better, kind of thing. It gives a lot of flexibility. But also there is the commercial element, obviously the ticketing element you've got to take into consideration. It's a shame that the playoff format will have to change and go back to this aggregate score, because I don't think that's really where we want to go. And really this year will have been the first time we will have seen the new format in terms of the playoffs. But I think the league is making solid decisions. It consults all the clubs. We're having regular meetings about it, and we remain fluid in terms of how we're doing. All the clubs are in constant communication, sharing good practices, and I think that's the best thing that we can do right now. But certainly, I think to go back to your original question, I think the 3 games format in league coming up, I think it's good, and guys love playing games. Coaches, players, you want to play games. Especially going, I think, into that second part of the season. I think practice is very important, crucial preparation. But games is what guys want to do basically, and everyone wants to be involved. Certainly, spectators want to see more games. There's no question about that.
I mean, the games will certainly stack up, considering they want to do the playoff final in May. And, you don't know the situation of when the season could start. Nick, I mean, you could be looking at double headers or 2 or 3 games a week. I mean, I don't know about you, but I quite like having that format where you all of a sudden got your double header and then you've got your midweek game and another game on the weekend. I think it's quite good to get into that routine of, having 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 games a week sometimes.
I think, 4 might be pushing it a bit. And I think the odd double header, even double header followed by double header, is not the end of the world. I think that the problem with the double headers is if you get they've got to be, everybody's got to have them. If you play a game Saturday, Sunday, and you're playing a team on the Sunday that hasn't played on the Saturday, that's a big advantage. We always had this thing with I'm laughing here to give Andreas knows what I'm going to say here. We always had this thing when Glasgow came down to play us, because Plymouth always used to play on the Sunday. Glasgow came down, we'd muller them on the Saturday and take to 3 overtimes or something. And then they'd have to go down to Plymouth on the Sunday, and Plymouth had the big advantage because they hadn't played on the Saturday. Although to be fair, I always think Kieran saved his best games for Plymouth, didn't he, Andreas? So he got that.
Yes.
I come back to that first game of the season. I think because I'm pretty sure that when we played when we lost to Sheffield on the Saturday, the Sunday we went to Surrey and they hadn't played on the Saturday, and that's where it's problematic. If everybody's got a double header, it's okay. Then you can do it as long as there aren't, as long as you're not doing it every weekend. That's the problem with it. But we're gonna, have to be flat. There's gonna have to be a plan and plan B, plan C, plan D. If the season doesn't start till 1st of October, 1st of November, 1st of December, 1st of January, or whatever, we've got to kind of be ready for that and drop the number of games or whatever, or squeeze them. I think there's got to be some flexibility in there. But the plan at the moment, I think, is the right one. I agree with Andreas. 3 games. I like the 3 games because they're head-to-head. You get those head-to-head games all the way through the season, games that matter, and games that otherwise would just be another game become big games. So I'm definitely a fan of the 3 games if we can do it.
And the one thing to add again to that whole thing is, I know there's some teams that play maybe with a 6 or 7 man rotation, but I think using your bench is such an important thing. And in anything, it kind of makes coaches to have to do that. I think it creates a different setting, especially, if you have, young players and stuff, an opportunity to get valuable experience. I think with a 3-game series, that definitely does that. That's the point, basically. But at the end of the day, if you have a double header, well, you got to use your bench. And I think that's another element of the competition, really. If you have to go deeper, you have to go deeper, basically. There's different ways of approaching that, I suppose. There's different kind of ways you want to play the game and how you want to do it, with shorter rotation, bigger rotation. Certainly this year and the last couple of years, I think we've increased our rotation on players, and I think that has paid off.
Yeah, I think I definitely don't envy the job of the guys that have got to do the scheduling, because, like you said, not every club owns their own venue, so it's down to venue availability, but also you don't know when the season's actually going to start. And if you're trying to play 3 games rather than 2 games from last year, you've almost got 10 extra games to kind of squeeze into that schedule before you have that playoff final in May as well. So it's certainly going to be a tricky squeeze. But I think the one thing that the COVID situation kind of has highlighted is the importance for teams to kind of have their own venue and to be able to control when their fixtures are.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think having your own venue gives you a lot of flexibility for a number of things. Certainly for fixtures in domestically, but it gives you opportunities to play in Europe. That's one of the biggest challenges when playing in Europe, that you have to have midweek games. I think that having your own facility gives you a number of positive things that you can operate. In the current condition, perhaps also some challenges that you have to deal with. But certainly, I think having flexibility around time that you can schedule games and days that you can schedule games, it will be beneficial under those circumstances. At the end of the day, no one can call what's going to happen. If we have to squeeze games, we'll have to squeeze games. I think the most important, I think all of us will agree, we just want to go back playing with spectators. And if it means squeezing a few games, I think everyone will be able to handle that. I think we just want to make sure we have a safe return. And get back to doing what we love doing.
That sounds like a good place to move on to the last kind of topic I wanted to kind of cover on this episode, is that is plans for next season in terms of off the court and player recruitment. How does the player recruitment side of things work from your point of view, when you don't necessarily have that set start date for contracts of players to arrive in this country, or for players to start training and being able to use the court as well?
There's a lot of uncertainties and stuff, and budgets have been affected in so many different ways. I think the clubs in the league have taken the right steps in terms of looking at contracts and everything that goes around it, and we're planning for a return sooner rather than later. But it's just very difficult to say at the moment. Us as a coaching staff, we've been looking at our recruitment for next season. And we're working really hard at the moment. This is, in a sense, business as usual. There is a lot more uncertainties, of course, around a number of things. But I think I go back to how we started this conversation. You just got to control what you can control. And I think we got a plan, like the season is starting in September, but be flexible for a later start. And I think that's how the league is approaching things. That's how all clubs are approaching things. And certainly, we want to put a competitive team on the floor. Again, this coming season, we want to continue the progress that we have shown the last 6 years. This is going to be our 7th season in the BBL. And we're hoping there is going to be a 7th season, things will get going earlier or sooner, and just playing. Basketball will return, and we want to be ready. And that's kind of how we've been going about doing things.
Let's say a normal season's planning to go ahead as normal. Season starts in September. You've just finished your season in May. What does recruitment normally look like for you guys? Do you sit and give yourself a little break and then start looking at the plans for next season, or is it basketball never stops? I imagine.
Oh God! You know what we did? I'll come in here because I did get a break for the first time in 5 years actually with lockdown. Before we had that announcement about next season, I mean, you could normally the season will end when you have a playoff game at some point where you lose, and you can guarantee that the following day Andreas is on the phone saying, agents have been, sent these guys through, have a look at them, who do we want? I mean, it is never ending. As soon as the season ends, you start in looking at re-signing players if you want to re-sign players, talking about which players are going to stay and who's got other plans, and giving them a bit of opportunity to find other contracts if they want to. Because, as you say, most players are on 1-year contracts, so they've got a right to go and look somewhere else as well. So it's never ending. I got a little bit of. Well, Andreas does far more than me. He's very good actually at not sending me too much to look at. But I would say we got a short break, didn't we? But otherwise, it is business as usual. Yes.
And I think, I'm just trying not to bombard Nick with things. I kind of, as he says, we finish the season, and then I'll start sending him things through, and he's great at combining with his teacher commitments as well, and going through players, and he has done that this time around. And obviously, he has a lot of challenges right now to work in his school environment. And for Nick, he hasn't mentioned it, but he's going into his retirement as well. So what a year to go into that retirement, basically. But I think, just to go back to it, I think my Ursula was asked that kind of question about the season and everything. And as Ursula said, so my wife's response was, we're either in the season or we're preparing for the season. I think that was the best way to say it. I think, I think, a lot of people think off season is this time where, everyone goes away and just rest and, pick things up in September. I think from our point of view, it's just preparation about next year. And, a lot of review, and just kind of making sure we keep working. And I think that's something, recruitment is something that we've done very well over the years, and it has been great to have Nick's advice. I mean, his feedback on players when I send him stuff is essential. We're talking as a staff. Chris Bourne as well, I need to mention him as well. He gets involved as well. We spend a lot of time looking at guys and, and reviewing what we can do better next season. We consider ourselves as a progressive club, and we just want to keep on pushing things forward. So it's business as usual, as Nick said, really. That's the short answer.
It was 1 year, wasn't it? What was that year we got everybody signed, like, by the end of June? It was when we had Rondell and Jordan Davis.
That was unbelievable.
And it was amazing, wasn't it? We were sort of didn't know what to do with ourselves. It was okay, wasn't it? Because soon afterwards we got all the problems with the visas and the passports, and it was like we were sorting that, or you were sorting that out. So it wasn't like you got much of a rest. But I think 1 year we managed to get everything sorted out by about the end of June. But
I think, sometimes it's that challenge where you have one spot that you haven't filled, and it keeps on dragging on, and you get to August and you're going, oh my God, we got to find the right fit there, kind of thing. But that year that Nick says, I mean, it was unbelievable, really. We've done our job. We announced things very early as well, if I'm correct as well, if I remember that year. And then it was all about kind of waiting for September for all the guys to be here and get going, basically. We're working hard behind the scenes. There's a lot of challenges, uncertainties. We discussed it. But our plan is to have a competitive team on the floor. And we want to keep on progressing. I mean, that's for sure.
I remember that year. You sent me the text with the guys as you were signing them, and I was quite surprised you got it all wrapped up early. I was trying to plan out the signing announcements throughout the summer, and then all of a sudden you text me saying, "Oh, there you go, squad's all done." And I was okay. Let's try and see if we can pace these out a little bit.
I think I was sending players to Nick, and Nick was going like, "Yeah, it looks good to me." And to be honest, I was going like, "Looks." I don't know if Nick wanted to go on a holiday earlier or something that year, perhaps. But it just, you never know how these things will go, because at the end of the day, sometimes you can find the right fit straight away. Sometimes you need to take a little bit longer. Obviously, budget always plays a role to it as well. Sometimes expectations of the player earlier in the season, later in the season. So you just gotta. That's part of the recruitment. So sometimes you can do your business really early. Sometimes it might take you a little bit longer, kind of thing. Also, it just comes down to club preference. If you want to have your guys early in the season, or you're prepared to tweak things when the season starts. I think there's a lot of things that come into it. For us, it's just about finding the right fit, what we're looking for. And, we spend a lot of time looking at guys. Nick is great help. Chris is great help. And it's a team effort in a lot of ways. Mike helps with all the visa flight stuff as well. It's a lot of components, a lot of things happening behind the scenes that obviously people don't always get to see. Last Dance has been able to show us a little bit of the things that are happening. I mean, can you believe Pippen was, his contract situation kind of thing? I mean, it was just unbelievable kind of thing to see. But I think Last Dance has given a bit of perspective to people what's happening behind the scenes, and I think everyone has been excited. Good time to come out. And I think it gives you a little bit of indication what's happened. But there's certainly a lot of work that goes that sometimes it goes unnoticed. But to me, it means a lot, because Nick's advice, Chris's advice, what Mike does. I mean, we have a great group of people involved with the club.
What's the player market been like this season? Because I imagine a lot of clubs have had their player budget stripped because of COVID. Are you finding a lot more players becoming available that maybe you wouldn't have had available in previous years?
I think it's just uncertain. I think, across all countries, this has been felt. And certainly there is a little bit more activity now as we're going into July. I think everyone is finding their fit in it, I suppose. Agents, players, I think teams. There's so many uncertainties. I mean, you're looking at the NBA right now, what's going to happen to next year. I think, the NBA and the G League will affect a little bit what's happening in Europe. Certainly now all the competitions coming to an end. I think the German championship finished, the Spanish championship finished now. I think that kind of starts opening up a little bit the market. It has been a strange market. I mean, it just highlights the climate that there is out there. The reality is the sports industry, has been hit hard like any other industry. I think teams have to make decisions based on finances. Of course, makes absolute sense. Players have to earn their livelihood, and they've got to make decisions on based what's best for them and their families, basically. And that's where agents come in as well, because they're trying to help players and connect them with clubs. I think it has been a different market. There's no question for sure. And you hear a lot of stories. You hear, like teams reducing the budget drastically. You hear, teams reducing the number of imports that they have. But it's across the whole. It doesn't matter if you're in the. I've said it before. It doesn't matter if you're in the EuroLeague, the BBL, ACB, whatever it is. This has affected everyone worldwide.
I think one of the biggest things that you see in the BBL is the most successful teams have that consistency within their squad. And I know we've had that core of players that have remained the same over the years. Are you speaking with existing players, and have you got a rough idea of how you want that squad how you want that core to look next season?
We're in discussions with our players, making everyone aware of the situation and kind of talking about next season and all those kind of aspects. Consistency has been a key element of what we've done with the Flyers over the years, starting from Division 3, going to the BBL years as well. So that's very important for us. We're not the type of club that will have a completely different team the following year after a season. We don't tend to do that. There is always got to be some movement. There's got to be some changes. I mean, it's kind of part of the business. But certainly for us, we want that stability, people knowing the system, knowing what we do on the floor. That's crucial for us, and it will continue to be such.
Yeah, I think the way the good BBL teams do have that consistency. They're able to keep certainly the British core. You quite often find that teams will shuffle the Americans. It's not uncommon to see 3 new Americans every year at each team. I think the more successful teams that do a good job at keeping the same import players in. And if you look at, this is what I think Glasgow have been, for example, are a pretty good example here in that they've had that core of local players, the Scottish guys, Gareth and Ali and Ronnie Bunyan and Kieran's only just retired, but they got their Scottish guys. And I think this year they kept 1 American, they got 2 new Americans in. And we were sort of almost trying to do the same sort of thing, didn't we? We kept Fred on, we kept 1 of our Americans. We tried to sort of keep, that British core with, for example, Dan and Marcus and Lewis and whatever. I think that's I think for the, if you like, the middling teams, which we're trying to get out of the middle up to the top, is I think a good model. And if you look at obviously Leicester, Leicester, Newcastle, so on, have been able, are often able to keep the same guys there. And an interesting one, I think, is Worcester. I mean, when we came into the league, I think Worcester had won a couple of trophies the year before we came into the league. Worcester have had a different team all 5 years we've been in the league. And they shuffle they just changed the team every year. This year they were great. They were really good this year. Last year they were not great. And you can try that. You can reshuffle the team every year. Sometimes you'll get it right, and you'll get a good blend in, but it's not the way that you're going to improve over a period of time. You've got to try and get some kind of established base, and then make little tweaks, little changes each year and build. That's how you build, and that's what we try and do.
And developing players during this process as well, like what Nick said, is just so important. Guys that come and either then maybe for a couple of years or maybe they're like longer. I think it's just developing and working with them. And certainly, if you have a big budget and you want to keep on changing things and working through and trying to find the right mix, you can go down that route. I think the way we've done things is just developing players and giving them an opportunity to show what they can do on the court and building that chemistry. And I think that has been key part of the success. If you look at all our teams that have been successful over the past, have been teams that have been together for a while and they have kind of a core. You can look at EBL years or you can use BBL years as well, and I think that's essential for any team. I think it doesn't matter if it's basketball. I think, you go, we're talking about, I mentioned Last Dance before, you were talking about the Chicago Bulls. They changed some things along the way, but the core was there. And, that makes a big difference, I think.
One of the interesting things I saw, I think it was HoopsFix that tweeted it out, but the allowance of that extra American in the BBL next season. Are you planning to use that full allocation of Americans, or how's that going to look next season? Does that make an impact?
So I think. Listen, the 4 US players.
I'm just trying to see if Joe's got any money on the table there that he can give us that we can afford 4 Americans with. How's that going to work? Where's this money coming from, Joe?
So I think the 4 US players. At the end of the day, you can choose to have 4 US players and 1 European, so you can have 5 non-British players. If you wanted to, you can go down that route. It comes down to this. It gives teams flexibility. One of the reasons for this is because clubs want to go and play in Europe. Like, for example, London Lions now are looking to compete in the Champions League. So I think what happens is when you do go to European competitions, most clubs will have 4, sometimes 5 Americans basically play. So I think it opens that opportunity to be able to compete against those teams. If you wish to go down that route, it doesn't mean because you have 4 US spots that you have to get 4 US players. I think it comes down to how you want to build a team, and maybe it is the right thing for a club to do that. maybe it isn't. Nick talked about money. Budget has obviously things to do with it. That's part of it. I don't think necessarily. There's two ways to see it. Or one more spot for an American player. Will clubs go that route kind of thing to get another American instead of getting a British player? I think you can see it in a lot of different ways. It gives us the option to be competitive in Europe. But at the end of the day, just because you have those spots, it doesn't mean you have to fill them. I think it comes down to your mentality, how you want to build the program. And I'm not against these 4 US players. I think it's positive. I think we want to have more BBL clubs competing in Europe. Leicester did it a couple of years ago. And it's tough. The thing is, when you're playing in domestic and European competition, having an 8-man rotation cannot get it done for you. Injuries, loading, you cannot sustain it. You will need to have a bigger roster. So the reality is, you see it in the EuroLeague, you see it in Champions League. Sometimes teams operate in 12 to 14 type of players roster, and then you will play maybe different lineups in the domestic championship and different lineups perhaps in Europe. It gives you that flexibility. So there's a number of reasons behind it. And if we're forward thinking, we've got to be thinking what would take us to be competitive in Europe. And there's a lot of clubs that certainly have aspirations to go and play in Europe. We want London Lions to be successful in Europe. I think it's great for the league, because I think the league is underestimated. Yeah, there's things that, we need to improve on as a league. There's no question about that. And clubs need to improve on things. But at the end of the day, our league is very competitive. There's some really good basketball players in this league. And I think sometimes we often overlooked. And people don't value the league for what it is. We have guys that played very high level basketball, and yeah, I would like to see more British players. I would like to see some more of the national team players be back in the UK. That's for sure. And it's got to happen. I think we've got to have that positive mentality. There's things to be done to achieve this, and we can talk about this for quite a long time. But bottom line is, our aspiration should be to keep growing our league here, make sure we utilize domestic talent, but also see teams competing in Europe. And certainly the 4 Americans will help towards that.
Yeah, I think the other thing you've got to bear in mind with Americans is it's not, I was sort of saying before that a lot of clubs will do the 3 Americans and they rotate them every year, and it makes them sound a little bit like hired guns, that you've got your base team and then you get the best 3 Americans you can get your hands on. And it's more subtle than that, really. You because you've got to remember some of the import players you get are experienced. They've been pros for a number of years. Some of them are rookies, and there is a difference in cost, to be blunt about it. And you will vary that. You will want to have one of your Americans that's got some experience. You wouldn't want to have. I don't think most teams want to have 3 rookies. But you probably, just from a cost point of view, want at least one of your players to be rookies. And it may well be you're not just getting the best 3 Americans we can get, or maybe even doing it by position. You may think we want to have one guy who's a stud, who's a guaranteed scorer or whatever. Maybe one guy who's going to be a starter at that spot, a real good role player who's going to nail that spot down. And then maybe the third guy, your third American, might be a rookie who's going to play 6-man, something like that. It's not always just about getting numbers in. And we can get an extra one now. We can have 4 hired guns rather than 3. It doesn't work like that. You've got to work within the budget and the team, and you do want that core group. You want experience. You want you guys who nobody's seen before, who've got a bit of potential, who could be anything. That's how you build the squad, and you've got to do it within a very tight budget. Everybody, most teams' budgets are tight anyway. That's how it works. And the 4 Americans, well, I don't know if we'll. I wasn't, I was joking a bit before, but I can't see how we're going to afford in the current climate how we'll get managed 4 this year. But I'm not certain the 4 necessarily is desirable within that type of team that you're trying to build. So it will vary from team to team.
Just finally, can you give us any exclusives as to any players for next season, or is that still very tight-lipped?
You've got to pay for that.
I'm so used to Nick's cooking videos. I'm happy to just be watching those and not having any players announcements happening for a while. But you know what? Actually, I'll change that, and there's got to be announcements out soon. I think July there is going to be a busy month of announcements. I think there are things on the pipeline that have been working. So I think we want all our fans, all our spectators to know that there's a lot of work behind the scenes, and there will be further announcements. But we're not going to give up any names or anything like that, Joe. You have to wait for that.
That sounds like a perfect place to wrap things up. Andreas, Nick, thanks for joining us. Let's hope we can do this again face to face sometime soon.
This is the Bristol Flyers Podcast.